Namaste. Welcome, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my journey through the Tarot de Marseille in its many iterations. And today we're going to look at Le Bateleur. And you can see a few different titles on the screen. There are a few other cards I have as well. And so we're going to look at about 10 or so different decks and really talk about the energy of this card and how the card has evolved from country to country and region to region, what some of these symbols might represent, and I think most importantly, how we might work with them in a reading. And namaste, Arya. Welcome. For those of you that are new, I am by no means a Marseille expert. My name is Sadhana. I have been reading tarot for a really long time and just absolutely love working with this medium. And spending a good chunk of 2024 really diving into the Tarot de Marseille. So we began this journey with the minors, then the Marseille honors, and now I'm starting this journey with the with the major arcana. And today is the first episode. So this is number 1, Le Bateleur. Welcome, Cleves. And there are many things, many things that we can look at. I'm sure many of you have read plenty of books on these cards, and I look forward to hearing your interpretations as well too. I think first and foremost, hi Dee, welcome. This is a number 1 card, and regardless of the deck that you are working with, number 1 is it's a very important number. It is a beginning. It is the number 1, and there's something quite significant in this card being connected to the aces. And numerology, really not something we talk a lot about in Tarot de Marseille, but the concept of number 1, whatever way you are thinking about this, is it has a youthfulness to it. It is fresh. It's a new beginning, and it is whole, and it is full of possibilities. And I think with the Bateleur, the magician, we need to remember that there are endless possibilities here. I've often said with aces that we don't want to waste this opportunity with an ace showing up in a reading. It really is it's an opportunity, it's a gift to do something in a different way, to start fresh, and there is an action that is most definitely required. And when I was rereading something from Camellia Elias, she was talking about, now I don't know what deck she was looking at in her, can you see it in the gas when you don't see it in the gas when, this is the Rivsalt. She was talking about this red blotch down here. And you notice the magician in the Noble has red shoes, but then later on in Marseille, the magician has yellow shoes. So I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the red and the yellow. Maybe we'll come back to the Soprafino. This really intrigued me because I've always seen the magician as there's an action, right? There's a call to action with the number 1s, and we want to do something with them. They're wonderful. I mean, not everybody embraces new. I guess each of our responses is different, and I'm going to come back to the magician quality of this, the mercurial quality of this card. But first of all, this red shoe, and then later the yellow shoe. There's something about that as connected to the element of fire. It is the right foot and doing something. Camellia Elias also compares the right foot to the left foot, and some of the older decks, you'll see that there's a um, and have a good look at the cards that you're looking at. Some decks, it's like there's fire on one leg and something green on the other leg. And one of the things I love that she says is that whatever draws your, and this is paraphrasing, whatever draws your attention in a card is exactly what needs to draw your attention in that reading. And I think that's so true. It's so important. You may never look above the table in a reading. You might be really obsessed with what's going on underneath the table. And metaphorically, that means something as well, too. What's going on underneath the table. And we have the table figures very largely in this card. And so just the table itself could be representing something. And we have this really weird sort of evolution of the table and the table legs. I'm going to come back to the yellow shoe in just a second. The table and the table legs. So in the Tarot de Marseille, for sure we have 3 legs. We never see the 4th leg. But if you look at some of the historical decks, like I have the Soprafina right here, you do see the 4th leg. And there's some weird writing on the 4th leg, actually. I just noticed that. That's very bizarre. We see no legs in the tarot key. Oh my goodness, what's this one called? La Quarta de Tarot key. And then I did a full walkthrough of the Bolognese deck, and we don't see any legs at all. So maybe that is significant, but where I was going to go with that is, if this is a new beginning and this is a place that we're starting from, maybe we're only starting with 3 legs. Maybe we're feeling a little wobbly. We don't have all of our feet on the ground. We're not really sure where that 4th leg is or where it's going to come from. So I think that's an interesting thing as well, too. The table leg colors, the way that some of them are turned. I mean, you could also look at any of that. So do pay attention to what's going on beneath the table. The idea of the yellow shoes and the color yellow is the element of air. It's the color of intelligence, the mind, the intellect. And this tells us something about the quality of the magician, the ability of the magician to think quickly. And I'm really glad that my most recent the way that I have gone through the tarot over the last few years was I did a year with the Thoth, and then in that same year, I've actually been spending quite a bit of time revisiting the Golden Dawn correspondences and the astrological correspondences. And everything is really starting to fit together. I'm seeing things and correspondences that I thought actually were quite separate or brought in by, in different traditions. But if I think about these yellow shoes and the color yellow, this is kind of important, and it tells us something about the magician. And then later on, this card being associated with Mercury and that not thick, quick thinking, the ability to change directions, synthesize things. And then, of course, that fits in with there's something about flexibility and the magician and the gesture and the con artist and the trickster himself being able to shuffle things around. And we can't necessarily think as quickly as he does. So look below the table, look at the table, look above the table. There's a lot of levels and layers to all of this. I like that aria, thinking on his feet. So, table legs, I don't know, maybe. It seems like there is so much we can pick up on in this card that table legs really kind of take a back door, but it's certainly an interesting point of conversation. On the table, depending on what deck you're looking at, we have a pouch of some sort, kind of like a perhaps a Mary Poppins bag. Anything, right? Anything could be coming out of that bag. There is a sense of, yeah, well, we don't know what's in that bag, and I think we might be surprised what comes out of there. We have dice in some decks. We'd have some kind of sword or a pen, um, for sure, on the table, at least one. We have coins, or perhaps in some decks we have acorns. There is a wand, usually in the left hand, usually, of the magician. And so there's many many tools, many objects that are available for the magician to create what he needs to create or what he wants to create. It is unlikely that he will use everything on the table. And I like this, that we have choices here early on in this journey. What is in your bag of tricks? And you might not display everything. And there's one deck here. Which one is it? It almost looks as if it's this one here. Looking at what is on the table, it almost feels like this is somebody in a street market who may have been, I don't know, repairing shoes. But he has a side hustle. He has a side hustle as a con artist. I was just sitting looking at it, and it feels like there's multiple things going on at the same time, which you would expect in a magic act. And maybe it's the side hustle that makes more money for the bagatelle than being a shoe repairman. I don't know, but I was really curious about what actually was on this table. And the apron is really, and if you look at the table, the nature of the table is really interesting too. The way, interesting as well too, the inset in the table doesn't actually have corners. There's little pieces on the table to block off the corners. So we have this layer. And then we have what's going on above the table. So the upper body of the magician. And there is some weight, of course, that is put into the costume itself, the belt, the hat, things that are seen in the hair, and as well as the wand or whatever is in the left hand of the magician. In some decks, you will also see something in the right hand of the magician. And that has been described as everything. I'd say acorn and coin. Acorn going back to something quite magical that connects us to another culture, another time. And then the coin, of course, brings in that reality of what the magician is actually up to and what is most important to the magician. And you'll notice that some of the older decks, there may or may not be anything in the right hand. Now, if we go to this deck here, the Bolognese deck, I think I have to look at them really close up. Really hard to say. maybe a wand in the right hand. Nothing immediately immediately in the left hand, but it looks like they are playing that game where you move things underneath a cup. And in the Soprafino Tarot, the right hand is on the waist in a very making a powerful gesture and statement. Left hand is the cup. And we all know that the cup can, all kinds of things can be in the cup. Any number of drugs or potions to make you think in different ways. And this is the Camoin Yorovsky Tarot. And we see a coin in the right hand and a wand in the left hand. This is the Noble, and there is definitely something in the right hand. May or may not be a coin, and we have a wand in the left hand that looks an awful lot like a penis. And then in this particular one, we have a wand and a red object, so the color has been changed in this deck. Okay, so make of those things. I just really like that advice about letting yourself, let yourself be guided in the cards to what feels significant in a particular reading. Let's go to Dee's comment. All of the objects attract and distract the onlooker, or perhaps ourselves, when we cannot decide what to do next. So this is, you know, there's a really important question in one of the books I was reading, and that was saying, well, why is it easier sometimes to be distracted? Like, why do we choose distraction over discipline, focus? And I thought that was a really good question. I'm not sure I had built that into this card before. Ooh, clever but not wise. And in a way, this makes me think about, I talked about this earlier this week in some talk, and that was the danger of multitasking. The danger of multitasking. And I think, you know, in our culture, there's some sort of brilliance attached to multitasking. But the truth is, when you do so many things at the same time, you don't really do anything well. It is a sign of dexterity, for sure, the way that we may or may not be able to juggle many things at the same time. But it's certainly not a sign of groundedness. And rarely do things ever get finished, or done well, or done as well as if you had been doing one or maybe two things at the same time. And so when I think of the magician and maybe future associations with Mercury and rapidity and speed, there's a danger in that. There's a caution in that. Hello, nine-tailed fox. So there's that. Number one, you said, Le Bateleur, clever but not wise. It is a one. And so that is another, is that not another clue that there is perhaps some naivety here? Do we want our surgeon or pilot multitasking? Yeah, exactly. There is a level of focus that is required to execute something precisely. And here's another thing. So we don't, except for this deck here, which if you haven't seen the walkthrough, I did a whole walkthrough of this Bolognese deck. Which is, sorry, I'm just going to get you the title so I get the title right. It is the Tarocchi Fine dalla Torre. Tarocchi Fine dalla Torre, which is characteristic, apparently, of Bolognese decks. I was going to talk about the noise. So we see the audience here. We see people are in front and behind. And there is chatter, laughter, cheering. And when I think about noise in the tarot, that's really interesting because that reminds me of 8, 9, and 10 of Wands. And it makes me think about those decks, more contemporary decks, where we see behind the scenes or in front of the scenes, or we see the card from a different point of view. I think that's really important. We need to realize that this is likely a magician who is out on the street, in a street market, doing this. And it's such a funny thing, right? So I think that, and then when you look at the landscape of the Tarot de Marseille, it almost looks as if this is some crazy person out in the middle of nowhere in the desert doing magic tricks or something. So there's something not right in this card. There's a sense that we're not, things aren't quite as they seem. Right? He seems to be out in the countryside, not in a street market. So where would you ever see a bateleur, a magician, out in the middle of nowhere? Right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense until you look at it symbolically. And the symbol that you will focus on. So, okay, there you go. No audience. No audience out there in the middle of nowhere. So is he out there practicing? Is this Dr. Frankenstein alone in his laboratory trying to get things right? I mean, when I work with more Waite-Smith inspired decks, I think, this really is a rookie, and I think about the mad scientist and people who are prone to shift courses easily. There's a lot of ego here, and it's a very cautionary card. While it is a sort of thumbs up, let's go energy, there's always something that we don't see. Perspective. I think perspective is really important here. And you can look at your decks. Generally in the Tarot de Marseille anyway, the magician is looking, it is said, to the past. So you can see in the 3 decks on the right, the magician is looking over their right shoulder, which would signify some kind of reflection. But more than past, present, future, which I don't tend to read, the idea of direction. So I want to see what the magician is looking at that is going to inform something in the reading, for sure. Okay. Now, let's move these older decks out of the way, get a couple more contemporary. So this is the Jaroski Cam 1. This is Flournoy's Noblet. Rousseau. This is Renault's deck. And this is Dodal. Also Yves Renault's deck. Or is it? Oh, sorry. Which iteration is this? No, this is a Flournoy deck. And this is the Gassman Tarot. Okay. And that noise behind me is my dog, not a magician. Okay. So the next thing I think is weird, significant in this card is the relationship between the wand in the left hand, or the penis in the left hand, and that weird growth between his legs in the ground. This is a number 1 card. We are talking about things that are initiated. So I really would love to hear your thoughts on this. So here we have a wand and some sort of weird plant that is described as looking like female genitalia. And then in this one, it has 3 leaves, all different colors. So a different colored leaf for each element, perhaps, and clearly not a wand. And this one is more looks more like a cactus, and a wand with 2, what do you call it? A 2-ended wand. And same here, and no color on the wand. And a plant that is very similar to this one. And then here, same thing, some sort of a plant. I've also read that the Magician is not a masculine card. It is an androgynous card. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say the genitalia has been removed, whether it is female or male. And that is something totally random that just came to my head right now. So take that with a grain of salt, but that was a bizarre thing. Magicians are always doing more than one thing at a time. This is true. Le jet de main requires misdirection of the onlooker's attention and focus. And, ooh, okay, so here's another really cool thing. This, now, maybe this was Camellia Elias, I'm not sure. So there is a discomfort that comes, at least for me, and I concur with this thought, in that kind of a situation, my brain becomes confused because I want to have the discipline to not look where where the magician wants me to be looking because I want to figure out the trick. Honestly, magicians give me a headache. And the idea here was that this card represents a confused mind, or I'm thinking the nervous system, and this really kind of leads me into the Mercury energy and too much mental stuff. So that was really interesting. But maybe not overthinking. Honestly, I don't know what to say other than what I just said about the plant on the ground between the legs. Something is definitely growing there. Maybe it energizes the magician. And why is the masculine looking shape in the left hand? So this is one of these signs of integration in the tarot. We'll often see that in the Temperance card that for example, Temperance, what's it called in this deck? Temperance, I believe. The right side isn't red, the right side is blue, and the left side is red. So we see a sign of integration by colors being reversed with their lefts and rights and things like that. And so maybe that's what we're looking at here. And then going further above the table, we have the conversation of the hat and the shape of the hat. And other than the Bolognese tarot, even in the Soprafino, there is a hint of that same shape of hat. That looks an awful lot like a lemniscate. That is a sign of energy and motion and infinite power and infinite possibility. It is, it's not falling off the head, it's level on the head. It's a large hat. It's a large hat that protects that covers the crown of the magician. It's an abnormally large hat. And you'd think it would be with the movement that the magician has, that it may fall off. But it doesn't look like that. It looks like it's secured on the head. So that's so where I'm going with this is one of my questions has to do with how this card, the gesture of this card changed, and the feeling of as above, so below, and the magician and the Waite-Smith, and some of the Golden Dawn decks where we have this gesture connecting spirit with earth. And perhaps in the Marseille, I don't know if that is so clearly represented, the as within, so without, as above, so below kind of thing. I think I'm reading this card. The one thing I would say is common across types of tarot decks. But what is unique here is the qualities that I've mentioned so far, which seem less important in as we go forward through the centuries in tarot. I pulled out, and I really, Aria, I forgot what you called this deck. I think it was you, some sort of a mishmash deck that this wasn't really, and I don't think this was ever claimed to be a Tarot de Marseille or a contemporary Tarot de Marseille, but the magician has a knife in the right hand. Yeah, this is the Tarot de Ozar. This is the Jodorowsky Camoin deck. And Jonasa Yaus, I don't know her name. Some of you may know her name, but this deck is Jonasa Yaus. That is not the creator's name. It is, and this deck is in Galician, the language. And the art is inspired by Jodorowsky, or by the teachings of Jodorowsky. And I find this really interesting because this is not a Tarot de Marseille. It is a Waite-Smith inspired deck. This is the Lily White Tarot by Celia Nelsville, comes out of France. And I would assume that it's a very pippish deck. The Waite-Smith inspired Marseille influences coming out of France. And those readers probably, and deck creators probably learned with Tarot de Marseille, not with Waite-Smith. And I find it really interesting, the similarity in these two cards. One that is inspired by the work of Jodorowsky, and one that is inspired by Pamela Coleman Smith. And I think what I'm seeing, or what is being emphasized in these two cards, is the infinite potential, and the fact that our choices and infinite energy is possible here. And we hold the world in our hands. We hold multiple choices in our hands. Yes. I'm just going to go back and comment on this comment. So in this particular deck, there are really interesting colors and what did you call them? Modern ideas lurking in the paint splatters. Yes, for sure. It's a real, it's a wonderful deck. I love working with this deck. So the reason why I'm putting this deck here is because it comes out of France, and it is sold as a Waite-Smith inspired deck. What do you think? Ooh, D, I like that comment. The knife on the table would be used to shred a scarf given to the entertainer to shred and then magically put back together. Yeah, tricks. So whether you are reading, I think we have a lot of choices of how to read this card, depending on the nature of the question. And maybe we do need a distraction. Maybe that angle is fundamental to understanding or finding your way with the question. Maybe the qualities of infinite potential and new beginnings and fresh starts, and maybe having more of a naive point of view will be good for navigating your problem, your question. And so how you approach the card may be different on different days with different questions. And then whether you are, if you're always working with the same deck, you will really get to know these subtle differences. And one that I didn't mention was the extra finger. And I don't know when and where the extra finger comes in and goes out. But if you look carefully in many of the decks in the left hand, there is an accessory digit or a sixth digit on the Magician. And again, that could represent dexterity. It could be an error. It could be a carving error. Do we know? And then that means the Magician has 11 fingers. I've even heard readers say, as far as this card being one of infinite possibilities, that if you look at the numbers on the dice can be counted, and on each dice it adds up to, what you see adds up to a 7, and 7 times 3 is 21. This links this card to the World card, and it shows that everything is possible. The whole world is possible in your hands. So there are ways to tell stories, and I think it's Jodorowsky connects this extra digit, which Dee suggests is a poor woodcut, and I have a feeling, yes, that's probably the case, because there is also an accessory digit in a foot in, I believe, in strength, and that there's a conversation about, well, what's the connection between the extra finger in the Magician and the extra toe in the Strength card. And, these are weird sorts of conversations, but when we do this sort of thing, we end up looking at that. Yeah. So what is your favorite Magician card and why? And if you have any thoughts about the plant between the legs and the wand in the left hand, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that. Okay. If you want to carry on this discussion and you want to post a question below, or we've had a few back and forths with some of the other cards, and I really appreciate it. And I also want to give an extra shout out to both Dee and to Aria, who have an immense knowledge, much more knowledge than I do. And the resources that they have shared have been so generous. So please be sure to look at the comments if you're enjoying this series below other videos, because there's a lot of wealth of information there. Thank you to all of you. I will we'll do the number 2 card next week, La Papesse, in her various forms, and I look forward to seeing you then. Okay, and I should be on at the regular time next weekend. Thank you so much. Take good care. Namaste.